Welcome to Irish Exit Everything. My name is Frank, and I have about $17,000 in student debt, which is comparatively not that bad, considering the average federal student loan borrower owes over $30,000. But it's still $17,000, which is not an insignificant amount of money and not something I can pay off anytime soon, especially if I can only afford to pay the bare minimum every month because I have other bills. It'll take years. And because of that, because student debt is personally affecting me and millions of other people, just a constant economic burden on our shoulders, with seemingly not much relief in sight, I've been thinking about higher education a lot recently. Why does it currently cost so much in the US? And why do we seemingly agree to pay that much? What do we get for it? Is it worth it? What is college really meant for? We all sort of bought into this belief that a bachelor's degree would be the credential we need to get a good paying job, which is our ticket to a comfortable life. And that might have been true in the past, for a while, for some people, but the state of the economy and the job market today determined that ship has sailed. Of course, you're more likely to get a better paying job if you get a college degree versus a high school diploma, but a comfortable life is not a guarantee. It's well documented that wages have been stagnant for decades because companies want the most highly qualified candidates, but will pull every trick in the book to pay them as little as possible. So while it's getting more and more expensive to live and more expensive to go to school, we're not really making any more money. So why are we still operating as if a college degree is a golden ticket to the good life? When for a lot of people, it's just a rubber stamp for an entry level position with a meager salary that barely covers the cost of that degree. The number of adults in the US with a college degree is increasing, so we largely think there are benefits to going, right? Whether we're explicitly told we should go or not. I mean, my high school had a guidance counselor whose job was to ask us, all right, what are you going to study in college? And what do you think you're going to do with that degree? Which sort of sets the tone that college is job training, essentially, at least on paper. But other than that, I personally don't remember being told directly that I needed to go to college. It always just seemed like that's what my generation was supposed to do, right? I actually texted my mom and asked her if she remembers specifically telling me to go to college when I was growing up, because I don't remember having a conversation like that. And she replied, I think so, with a question mark, because she wanted me and my sisters to be more than what she is. Those were her words, which is an insane thing to say because my mom is suggesting that she's less than because she didn't get a college education. And that's just not true. We all deserve a comfortable life simply for the fact that we're all human, regardless if we go to college or not. My issue isn't higher education. I enjoyed my experience and I would do it all again. The issue is education financing. If folks want to go to college for whatever reason, there shouldn't be a cost barrier that either prevents people from going entirely or puts people in outrageous debt up to their eyeballs just because they wanted to learn. Now, I can blab and blab at you about my experiences, but the student debt crisis is a collective issue. I mean, there are 45 million Americans with student debt, many of whom are in much worse situations than me. And that's very importantly raising some red flags. And it's not to say that any of us with student loans who are struggling to pay back that debt are victims. We're all just trying to do what we're supposed to do, right? What societal and economic pressures are telling us we have to do to have a comfortable life. But it's not working out for many of us, which puts the whole system in question. So I wanted to talk to some folks that I've met along my higher education journey to hear about their experiences with college and thoughts on student debt because it's not an issue that any one individual is going to solve. We need to be figuring this shit out together. So first, here are my good friends, Robbie and Tori.
When I was in high school, it wasn't like I was the smartest individual. I earned maybe like a 2.6 GPA or 2.7 or something like that, and that was barely enough just to stay eligible to compete. I'm a former student athlete in high school, former college athlete, obviously in undergrad. And so that was my whole motivation to go to college. So that was why I personally decided to go to college because I wanted to pursue my dreams of being a college athlete, and just see where that could take me. And so that's why I personally decided to go. I loved what I was doing in high school, and so I wanted to continue that throughout my collegiate experience. And so, did I feel any pressure to go to college? I would say, yeah, like of course. I feel like a lot of students who attend college, probably feel or felt some type of pressure at one point or another. For me personally, absolutely. Um, just talking to coaches as mentors in high school, they typically tell you, all right, so what do you want to do once you graduate? Like, especially if you're fortunate enough to be on a successful team in whatever sport you're competing in. And if you are one of the top guys on that team, your coaches are going to want that for you. And so oftentimes when it comes to high school athletes, their coaches are talking to them, how can I recruit? How can I get you recruited? How can I send you to college? Like that's what it's all about. At the end of your seasons, at the end of your sophomore season, you're talking about your junior season. At the end of your junior season, you're talking about at the beginning of your senior season, and this is your last year. What are you going to do? You want to go to the next level? You want to be competitive? These are the things that you have to do now to put in that work. And so, I would say definitely I felt pressure, but it wasn't in a sense as like, well, if I don't go to college, there was nothing else. So fortunately for me, I had great mentors around me. It was like, all right, well, if you don't want to go to college and play ball, what's your plan B? So they always made sure that I had a plan B, but you definitely have that pressure as a student athlete to go to college because your coaches are always going to remind you or try to find ways to get you recruited to push you onto the next level because ultimately that's how those coaches oftentimes, I'm not going to say all the time, but oftentimes that's how those high school coaches stay employed. Most of them are PE teachers. At least in my experience, most of them were PE teachers. And so they're going to have a job regardless, but the way they stay employed, the way they earn their extra cash is through coaching. And so if the more students you send to college to play sport, that is the more prestige you as a coach appeared, at least back in 2010 or back in 2006 all the way to 2010 when I graduated high school and decided to go to college. So you definitely feel some pressure from your coaches, family members. It really just depends on who we're talking about. Some family members like, yeah, they want you to go to college. Obviously, that's the next step. Some family members are just like, as long as you have a plan once you graduate high school, as long as you're not just sitting around the house being a bum or sitting around the house doing nothing or having no income being earned, then that might be, an issue. But you definitely feel some pressure when you're growing up. Obviously, even in, starting back in middle school, all the way to high school, even if you're not a college athlete, these individuals, your teachers are still almost always talking about college, which is why we have, standardized testing, which is why, teachers are, graded or assessed or evaluated on their students' scores, their English scores, their math scores, their science scores, things of that nature. And so even if you're not a student athlete, you are more than likely feeling some sort of pressure. And I certainly did before I knew I had the ability to go to college for athletics.
So growing up, I didn't have a bunch of pressure on me to go to college from my parents. I think there was sort of this expectation that I was going to go, and I think it's because I did pretty well in high school, so I didn't really feel as challenged in high school as um, I guess one would assume that I might, and so I think it was just sort of assumed I was going to go to college, but I didn't feel pressure from my family. In fact, actually, when I was going to college, there was never any pressure to even select a major. I think they were just excited that I was going. So my mother and my dad, growing up, were always like, you, as long as you love what you're doing, you don't have to pick something that's lucrative that you're going to make money in. And I knew that I loved to read and write, so that's why I ended up studying English and creative writing. I would say from society in general, yes, there always felt like there was a pressure to go to college because going to college meant getting a good job, and getting a good job is the only way that you can provide for your family or for the lifestyle that you want to live. And I don't think I grew up on or below the poverty line. Much of my upbringing was in a household that we really didn't have money. Um, so one of my personal motivations always felt like, if I go to college, I won't have to I won't have to have a life of living on or below the poverty line anymore. That going to college meant I was going to be able to at least provide for myself and my family. And society played a role in that, because if I didn't live, if I didn't, live on or below the poverty line growing up, I wouldn't. I don't think I would have felt as much pressure to go to college, and I certainly I may not have chosen the college that I went to. Predominantly went to the college I went to because my best friend was going there. So I had a little bit of a concept on what debt is. I wouldn't say I knew fully what student debt was. I just knew that debt existed because my family, by and large, was in debt for one reason or another. I think I learned about student debt pretty quickly as soon as I got to college. I qualified for grants, and I had both subsidized and unsubsidized loans that I took out. I didn't fully know what those meant until I used some of that money to buy a computer, for example, so that I could go to college, and use some of that money on things that maybe I shouldn't have used that money on. And then seeing like, oh shoot, this is kind of a lot of money that I'm taking out, and I had to sort of learn as I go, what student loans are and how much debt I could be in. I ended up leaving undergrad with $34,000 of debt. That's after 5 years. It was either 34 or 35,000, and then I went on to grad school, so I didn't have to start paying on that debt right away. I didn't have to take loans out for grad school because I had a grad assistantship that paid for the schooling, the tuition, and then the room and board fees as well.
I won't say how much student debt I have currently. I will say I started my undergraduate career or undergraduate educational journey in 2010, and I graduated in 4 years. I graduated in 2014. So I'll say when I graduated in 2014, I had approximately 40 grand total in student loan debt. Um, and how did I get to that point? That was like every year I was taking out a portion of money. So like for financial aid, I was getting like the Pell Grant. There was another grant in Illinois at the time that I was getting. I'm sure it still exists. And I was getting like money from the government, FAFSA, obviously. Um, my family contribution to my FAFSA account was zero. And so every year, essentially, when January 1st rolled around, and you got to go in, you got to fill out your FAFSA again, it was always zero for me, and so had to take out some student loans. And so if I graduated and I was approximately around 40K, then that would be approximately $10,000 a year I was taking out student loans. And now that I think about that, I want to see how much 10K in 2010 is. How much is that to today? Because 10K honestly does not seem like, in my opinion, I don't think that seems like a bad deal. I think a lot of students, if they only had to take out 10K a year in today's society, I think they'd be pretty content with that. 10 grand in 2010 compared to today. Honestly, not very much of an increase, which this is a shocker to me. So 10K in 2010 is equivalent to purchasing power of approximately 14 grand today. So 13,900 and some change. So about 14 grand today. So if you calculate 14 times, 4, if I was at 40, add on 16. So it's like 56 grand in student loan debt. So yeah, that's how I got to that point of 40K, about 10 grand a month or 10 grand a year when I was in undergrad. Do I feel like it was worth it? For me personally, absolutely. I do not believe, and I say this wholeheartedly, I do not believe I would be where I am without being able to go to college. College opened up my eyes to a lot of different things and a lot of different people and a lot of different perspectives. And so that challenged me a lot. But again, for me, what kept me in college and why I think it was worth it to me was just the fact that I was a student athlete. Just being able to continue to play the sport that I love for 4 years was something I'll never forget. Met a lot of good brothers that I still communicate to this day. And so that's extremely important to me, just to value those friendships, those coaches I'm still in contact with, a lot of them to this day as well. So I certainly do feel as if college was worth it for me. Now, that 40K that I graduated with at the end, I really don't know about that. But I do overall, if it's just a simple yes or no question, I absolutely do believe that college was worth it, at least for myself.
My experience in college and in grad school, I think was worth the price in terms of, like, if I'm thinking about the grand scheme of my college experience, I would say that it was worth the money that I paid. I think it's a bit priceless to try to quantify what my experience was. But part of that is informed by, the things that I got involved in. I was involved in student government. I was involved in, different student organizations, and was an RA, and I was involved in residence life. So there's a number of things I was involved in, and through that, I got to meet so many people that, to me, filled my life with meaning and joy and experiences, things that I would not have done on my own, that I had to be in community with other people and around other people to reap those benefits, at least at the time. Like, I would not have gotten out of my shell, out of high school and going into college. Just a very shy person in general, and wouldn't have naturally done that. So I think going to college, to me, was worth it. On paper, it was not worth it. I don't think anybody should have to go into debt to go to school. I think going to school is a right, and having a robust and truthful education, education rooted in the truth, not in what educational systems want you to learn, but what is the truth about history, about society, about people in it, about various aspects of the society we live in, economics, etc. Like, all of that, I think, should be, it's a human right to have education. So it should be not price tagged. But if you factor in, for me, if I factor in all the people that I met, you included, it's to me, without question, it was worth my experience. Getting out of debt and paying off my student loan debt was not for the faint of heart. It was not a fun time. I went without for a long time, and even in grad school, I paid like $20 or $25 every paycheck just to whittle it away. I was very determined to whittling that away and doing whatever I had to do to get out of student loan debt. I mean, to me, it almost felt like a science. It felt like game planning. It felt like doing whatever I can with what I have. It felt like, cutting out all of the what I consider to be luxuries, and being as frugal as I can be. Going to as many free things on campus that had food as I could. So that I could maximize, for example, or rather minimize the amount of groceries I had to buy or meals I had to make. So, yeah, I mean, to me, it was really about forecasting and planning, and then it was about being disciplined and paying off the debt that I said that I was going to pay, and doing that consistently, and knowing that even though I might be 25 months down the road from paying it off, this month that I'm paying on now matters, because I'm chiseling away not only at the interest but the principal. The strategy that I had was, when I became a full-time professional, I was paid once a month, and I got into the habit of paying down my debt twice a month. So my student loan debt, let's say I had a payment of $300 um, per month. That's not accurate. This is an example, but let's say I had that. I tasked myself with paying a full payment or as much as I could, let's say 300, and then doing another 150 or another $100 or however much I could spare. So twice a month I was paying, and then I was honestly, I was putting any money that I would get for like a birthday or a holiday, like a Christmas, any money that I would get from family or whatever. I wasn't using that always for fun. I was using it to pay down the debt. So I don't think people should have to do that. I think it's an atrocious system, and that student loan debt is truly unnecessary. But I do think that if the amount is within reach, that if it's not astronomical, and you have some money to pay towards it, I think being disciplined is the only way to actually whittle it down, especially if the government or the people in power aren't willing to erase that debt. I mean, if you're stuck with it, then being consistent and disciplined is, to me, the way that makes the most sense.
I don't know, man. Like it's become a part of, you know, almost like your daily bills or your monthly bills. Some people are paying a lot more than what I am to be paying. Some people are paying a lot less than what I am to be paying. Um, and so how I feel about paying back that student loan, um, I mean, I don't like it. Nobody does. You know what I mean? Like nobody, nobody likes paying bills. To be clear, right? But that's a part of being an adult. That's part of taking care of your responsibilities. I signed those loans when I was 18, 19, 20, and 21 years old. And so it's my responsibility now when I'm, in my younger 30s to continuously try to, pay off this debt. Um, does it affect how I approach other expenses, like potentially a mortgage? Absolutely. Hell yeah. And I say that because, again, some people pay more than what I pay, and some people pay less than what I pay, um, or what I am to be paying. Um, but when you have, you know, a bill of, 460 a month, let's just say that for an example, 460 for your student loans a month. That is a lot of money. That's groceries. That's your, if you have a house, like let's say you got a nice average size American house, that could cover, utilities such as Wi-Fi, electricity, gas, and water. 460, that can cover all of that. Um, it just depends on, how much you're actually paying, but it definitely impacts your other expenses. God forbid you have a child, um, daycare expenses, um, mortgage, indoor rent, depending on where you live in a country. That could be either, really affordable and attainable, and in other places it could be really challenging and heartbreaking to have to pay, 450, 460, up to 500. And even if for individuals who's paying lower than that, you know, 200, 300, we don't know their circumstances either. And the individuals that's paying more than that, like, you got doctors, I'm sure, man, they are hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt. And so it definitely impacts your other expenses. And you go to work 40 hours a week, sometimes 45, 50 hours a week, depending on the nature of your job. But a lot of cases in the US, at least from, I can't say US, I'll say a lot of my friends in my friend group, in my inner circle, um, to pay back how much they owe, they probably don't even make that amount. And again, I'm fortunate that I was able to, graduate with the 40K in debt. I have friends who are, nurses or um, just got placed into residency. So they're on their way to becoming doctors and things of that nature. And so depending on what field, like I have individuals who's tried to go to law school and taking all those tests that's pre-required to do that as well, or just to enter law school, or maybe they didn't pass the bar the first time around, so now they gotta, re-up and study again for another however long it takes before you're able to reapply or retake that test. And so it can get up there to hundreds of thousands of dollars. And so I know for a fact they feel some type of way about having to pay it, especially when they're still in the process of trying to get a doctor job or nursing job or a lawyer or become like an official attorney and pass the bar in whatever state that they reside in now. That could really be um, gut punching to a lot of my friends, and so I totally understand that as well. As an educator, I do believe that at some point loans should be forgiven um, under certain circumstances. One, you paid them on time for a certain period of time. I do believe that, you know, that loan should be potentially forgiven. Two, if you can prove that you don't make a certain percentage of the amount of loans you owe, I think that and you're still making payments. I think that at some point, and you're making payments consistently, at some point, I believe, yeah, maybe those loans should be forgiven. Or maybe those loans should be debted in general. If you went to school and you racked up, let's say, just to give an example, let's say a young student, let's say myself, let's say I get a 2.6 GPA in high school, but I'm recruited for whatever sport to go play at Harvard. Let's say Harvard or UCLA somewhere. But let's say like I ended up walking on, like I didn't make the team to earn a scholarship, but I ended up walking on, and these coaches again, they're telling, hey, we really want you at this school, or we really want you at Harvard, or we really want you at UCLA. And you attend that school. Or let's say you don't get recruited at all, but you get admitted into one of these prestigious schools. And because you have, a regular, 2.6, 3.0 GPA, and it's out of state, and let's say this is the only educational opportunity you have, let's say you got denied at your, couple of options of in-state, let's say you go rack up $150,000 in loans to attend a dream college just to pursue your educational career, your educational inspirations or aspirations. Now, let's say you graduate, you rack up 150K worth of loans, and you come out, you get an internship, and you work, I don't know, and you making $45,000 a year, $50,000 a year. I do not believe that an individual who busts their butts to pursue their goals, racked up 150,000 and graduated on time within 4 years, I don't believe that they should be responsible for spending half of their paychecks just towards student loans on a $45,000, $50,000 salary. They can't live not decently. They can't live decently off, that salary, off losing half their checks to them being responsible adults or responsible individuals and paying their student loans. And then another thing, if students or if individuals who graduate and they're not paying their loans, I also don't believe that the government should just come in and garnish their paychecks. What if they got their degree, they got 70K in student loans, but they can't find a job utilizing that degree, so they work at Walmart or they work at a convenience store. They're a sales associate at H&M or something. So they're making, $12 an hour, depending on what the minimum wage is in your state. And so they're not making any payments because they simply cannot afford it. They're still living at home with mom and dad or whoever they're living with, or maybe they have 2 or 3 roommates just to, make it easier on them. And so I don't believe that because they're not utilizing the loan that they pay because they simply can't find anything, not because they're inadequate. I don't believe that, their loans or their paychecks should be garnished from the government. I think there are a lot of hardworking individuals who's out here doing the best that they possibly can. And that's why I believe that they should be forgiven.
Very simply put, I think all student loan debt should be forgiven. I mean, without a question. It's unnecessary. It's a system based on trying to maximize the amount of profit out of out of people who can't afford it. These are college students, right? Like, these are not people that can necessarily afford it, and then it's about straddling them with debt for many people for the rest of their lives. So it's no question to me that it should be forgiven. It should have been forgiven years ago. In fact, it should have never became. We should have never had a system that became so um, focused on having student loans to have to pay off your education, which again is a human right, so should be provided to you. I do think um, that everybody deserves that. Everybody that deals with it should deserves that, and I think the people that have paid off the debt deserve to have the, if there are many people that are like, it's unfair. I had to pay $30,000. It's unfair to me. Okay, well, if you paid $30,000, then you should be given $30,000, whatever amount that you paid, since you had to go without, or you had to sacrifice whatever it may have been, that you could have put that money elsewhere. You know, um, so yeah, I mean, I don't think it would be unfair to me after I spent so much time paying my debt off, and I went without for a long period of time in my life. Um, I don't think that's unfair at all. If universal student loan debt happened today, I don't think it would be unfair that you or anybody else gets theirs forgiven, and you don't have to pay. I don't think that's unfair at all.
I don't think college is a scam. And this is coming from someone, I may feel or be biased. I currently work at a university. I work in higher education. I have been for, several years now. I don't think it's a scam, but I understand the perspective from so many individuals who may believe that it is a scam. I get that perspective, especially if, someone does not come from a ton of resources or a ton of money or a ton of help from their family while they're trying to pursue an educational journey, or they're trying to pursue, their childhood dreams of graduating or being a first gen graduate or being, a faculty member even at a public university or a private university. It don't matter. So I understand that perspective. I personally do not think it's a scam. I care a lot about the individuals that I meet with, the students that is. I care a lot about the faculty and staff members that I meet with. For the individuals who may believe it's a scam, and what I mean by I understand their perspective, I just want to say that I believe that everyone working has great intentions. Everyone working at a university, whether small, private, mid-major, public, whatever, I believe that everyone does have great intentions. I think that oftentimes it could be viewed as a business, in which every university is, right? No university wants to lose money. I mean, that's just bad for business. If you lose money, if you're not making money, then how are you paying your employees? If you're not making money, then how are you keeping the doors open, essentially? And that comes down to your attendance rates or your admittance rates. Like, how many people are you admitting from what regions, what states, um, demographics, things of that nature. And so all of that plays a part. And I think the people at the very top who has that ability, um, to not make it seem as if it's a business model or business oriented, I think that those individuals care too. However, they can't afford to lose money. They can't afford to say, all right, I'm going to make a decision and it won't be popular to the university. However, I'm making this decision because I genuinely care about the students who are trying to attend blank university or blank college. Uh, and so I definitely understand the perspective when individuals are reading about or, seeing, universities, whether they are struggling with certain numbers or, the fees are constantly increasing every year or tuition is constantly increasing every year. Um, I understand that perspective as well. Um, but no, I genuinely do not believe that college is a scam. I think it's very beneficial to the individuals who actually attends college and give it their all. The point of college or the purpose of college is to mature a young adult, young teen, or whatever. Whenever you start college, is to mature you, and to educate you. And I think a lot of times that could be missed. or it could be perceived a different way depending on your experience when you got to college. I went to a very small private liberal arts college. So honestly, I had some classrooms in high school that were larger than my classrooms in college and undergrad. So for me, it was very nurturing. It was very easy for me to get along with faculty members or professors. Um, but I think the point of it is just to develop whoever that person is from the time they get admitted into this institution until they say, I'm being accepted here and this is where I want to go, to the point where they are able to graduate. I think it's to develop them holistically. I think it's to get them to think outside their normal box. And it's also to challenge them to, break their shells, to, come out of under whatever rock you may have been accustomed to before you actually attended college. But I definitely do think the point of college is to develop the overall student who's joining there and to educate them, but also to push them out of their comfort zone.
I mean, to me, I think the point is and should be about learning about the world and the people in it and the different ways that the world works and doesn't work. And to me, education has always been about sharpening your skills, but also expanding your capacity, you know, both mentally and even physically and emotionally, right? Like we exist on this earth and are surrounded by people, and we are in community with other people, and that's messy because people have different opinions, thoughts, behaviors, etc. So to be able to come together, it takes a lot of work, it takes a lot of practice, and it takes a lot of messing up and trying again. And so to me, college should be about that. That there should be opportunities for people not only to expand their knowledge, the things that exist in the world, but it's also about expanding ourselves and what our capacities are for one another and for ourselves. For example, learning about the social emotional learning, learning about what that even was, for me, expanded my whole world. Like learning about how we can be in community with one another and how we can resolve conflict, or how we can both, or a community of people can all have different interests, different skills, different things that they want to do, but we can still, be together. To me, that's part of what college is about. It's not just learning, reading a book and regurgitating that information. It's about expanding and becoming more curious and having a more well-rounded view of the world and the people in it, so that we can be better for each other. And you can get that in engineering, you can get that in business, you can get that in political science, whatever it might be, whatever you're majoring in. To me, it's about the people and about learning about the world, so that you can be better for the rest of the people around you.
So just based off of my experience and what Robbie and Tori shared, there are some clear trends. We all felt pressure, or at least an expectation, from any number of directions to go to college. So we did what we were supposed to do, and we all earned at least a bachelor's degree, putting ourselves into a considerable amount of debt, which either continues to be a burden after however many years, or was quite a pain to pay off. And while the cost may not be worth it on paper, especially considering where you end up post-graduation, we all agree the college experience is most definitely something everyone should have if they would like. Because the point of college is not just, or shouldn't be, job training. It's about the community of students and educators together to help folks learn and mature and break out of their shell and grow in whatever path they strive for. But nowadays, folks will also walk away from campus with heaping piles of debt, and oftentimes no decent paying job to pay it all back. So that's just one reason why the student debt should be forgiven. All of it. And I would even say college should be free, so we don't end up in the same crisis. But this has just been a few Americans sharing their thoughts. I also wanted to get some international perspectives. So I reached out to Cassie, a friendly neighbor to the north, and Tatiana, my French correspondent and friend from grad school, to share notes and compare the American higher education system with other countries.
Hi, so I'm Cassie, and yeah, just for context, I'm Canadian. So I went through the Canadian education system. That's kind of going to be like the basis of my opinions and my experiences with post-secondary education. But taking a step back from that and thinking about, before I was in high school, really thinking about what I wanted to do after that, I can remember a lot of pressure put on me to do something post-secondary by family, teachers, even friends in some cases. I can remember being like 4, 5, 6 years old, being like sat down at the dinner table, um, having my family like lecture me on, I better like school because I'm going to be in school for the next 20 years. And, they were right. I graduated university when I was 22. So it was a long time. Yeah, I definitely did feel the pressure from them. And I wouldn't say that my family was particularly strict, but they were very strict academically. And I think a lot of that stemmed from no one in my family really going to school before myself, and they struggled. And I think they thought that they struggled because they didn't go to college or university. So they really pushed me to do that. Um, However, now I think their perspective on that shifted. I think today it's a lot harder to find stability even with having an education or a degree. So definitely changing thoughts on that. But originally, I think that's where a lot of this pressure stemmed from. So that is why I decided to pursue it, especially, being in high school and having all of these, program coordinators from universities and colleges coming in and talking to you about how, you need to take this seriously and start looking at your grades and what you want to do with the rest of your life. It didn't seem like there was really any other options for me. It just kind of seemed like university was the next logical step that I had to take. So I did that, and I did university specifically because in Ontario, at least, there's kind of this like negative stereotype that, granted, is kind of going away, but when I was still being lectured on this, it was that, university, you should go to university if you can. Um, University, it's a 4-year program, you get a degree. There's a lot of theory built into the classes, whereas college is a lot more practical, hands-on experience, which there's nothing wrong with that. Um, it's a 2-year program, and you come out of it with a certificate or a diploma. So yeah, I was definitely, I realized that it wasn't the case like that everywhere in the world because a lot of my American friends made fun of me for saying that I was in uni when I was still attending. But yeah, my family really pushed me for university for that reason. And as far as what I ended up pursuing, I went with nursing. And, being a nurse now, you need to be, compassionate and caring, and you need to want to help people. And as much as now I would love for that to be my answer as to why I went into nursing, that is not my 17-year-old self's answer. So along with just the pressure to go to school, my family really wanted something that was, stable, a career that, demanded respect, which being a nurse now is hilarious because we get disrespected on a daily basis, but that's a whole other topic. And something with job stability. So, nursing did tick those boxes, made my family happy. Um, and then just as far as myself, being, high school age, I liked science, social science, like, psychology, biology, mental health. So I thought that nursing would be kind of a good mix of all the things that I liked while still, ticking these boxes that my family had.
I just want to highlight the fact that all of my answers, they're based on my personal experience and it might not reflect the universal truth about higher education in France or in the US. I can only talk about what I've experienced and what I know, so keeping that in mind. And also, I believe that it's important to mention that the two systems, they are fundamentally different. Universities in the US, they are accredited by non-government organizations, and those organizations, they are the one responsible for, the standards. In France, public universities, they all have the same standards. You choose a major and your program and your schedule is fixed and pre-made for you, whether you go somewhere in the north of France, south of France, it's the same standard. There's not much flexibility unless you register to a private school or one of those grandes écoles, as we call them, which are also private schools. And you might have a better chance of having some diversity in the program. All right, so is there pressure for young people in France to go to college? This is not a yes or no question, because access to higher education is considered to be a right for all in France. Applying to public universities is open to anybody who has passed their final exam in high school. It's called le baccalauréat. It does not feel like we are pressured to pursue a higher education, but rather something that's easily achievable, because most public universities have an acceptance rate of 90% or more. So it really is the matter of, is there enough room to accept all the students? The process to apply, you just go on a website and it has a list of all the schools and you can apply wherever you want. And the only criteria for public universities, again, it's just to have this final exam from high school. So because this is easily achievable, it does not mean that there's no pressure, because yes, it sounds great on paper, but not everybody is meant for a general higher education, and it should not be stigmatized if you decide to take another path. And I think that similar to the US, in France, higher education is seen to be more elite, the elite path compared to trade schools, for example, and they're seen as less valuable, which to me is completely wrong, but that can bring some pressure in the sense, of trying to get through that general higher education. The sense of you succeeding is linked, yes, kind of directly. Do you have a higher degree? That is, yes, true. So it's not the same pressure, I feel, as in the US, because we know that it's achievable. We applying to universities, we don't need to have this perfect application with all the grades and extracurricular activities and all of that. So it's a different kind of pressure. Higher education in France is expected, we'll say, but not all higher educations are equal. So, like I talked earlier about public universities, we also have private universities and private schools, and they are usually located in the main big cities, which are 4 or 5. Two people with the same resume, so meaning they're going to have the same professional experience, the same degree, will apply to the same jobs, but the chances of the person who went to a private school are going to be greater than the person that went to a public school. That's a reality, unfortunately, and it creates a gap that influences people's opinion of higher education, because for some people, they believe that there's no value in higher education since you can simply just buy your degree, and it just only keeps increasing the gap between wealthy people and the rest of us. But that is a whole other bigger conversation as well. Why did I go to college in the US? Well, as you know, Frank, I traveled my whole life since my dad was in the French military. So to me, it always made sense that I would keep exploring the world as an adult. I always had this idea that I would want to study abroad and learn about a different culture. And my university had an exchange program with the US, so I applied. Um, Truly, it could have been the UK or any English speaking country, but it ended up being the US because and Michigan because that was the program. So I did not know much about Michigan before I moved in, and all my preconceived ideas about universities were from movies and TV shows that I had seen. So that's how I ended up in Michigan. My experience in the US, it can be separated into two parts, my undergrad and grad school. For my undergrad, I was an exchange student and I was only there for 9 months. Everything was new and exciting, and I didn't really pay attention to anything other than meeting new people, going to as many places as I could, being part of the exchange program, knowing that it's only for a short period of time. You kind of feel untouched by time. You live this experience to the fullest. You don't think long term or of the consequences. So I loved it. I didn't think that it was the US necessarily that made it so great, but just the experience itself of being abroad and all the people that I met, the whole context of it. So my first experience was amazing. When I came back for graduate school, it was very different because I had to work harder to come back without an exchange program. So it took me a whole year of exams, applications, visa paperwork. It felt more thought out. I was older. I was making an active decision to leave everything behind for a new adventure. I did not know this time when I was going to return or where my life is going to go from there. So it was a very different experience. And it was amazing because I loved studying at Oakland. It really, because it was a rather small university, it felt like there was a sense of community, and especially in the class with the professors, it felt like people cared about your success. And the fact that there is a campus, unlike in France, it brings the people together. So in France, your school is in the city, so there's no dorms or this campus. Your dorms are just apartments in smaller and just in the city. So it just felt great to be able to make my own choices, to come back, um, and the experience on the academic level. Still struggling with English sometimes. Um, it was great because I was able to make my own choices when it came down to my classes and the things that I was really interested in, the thing that I wanted to learn. I loved the community, the sense of belonging somewhere, and getting all the help from the professors and all the great people that I met. I'm actually on a podcast right now for one of them, so
Now, as far as cost, so keep in mind, I went to university in the city where I lived at the time, so I didn't have to pay for residence fees or meal plans. So just base tuition and like mandatory fees and dues, I think I paid total for the program $35,000. And then I was on OSAP, which is the Ontario Provincial Financial Aid Plan, like an assistance program. So they assessed me, and how OSAP works is they'll front all the money to the universities, and then at the end of your program, the money that they paid is broken down into loans and grants. So I think I was left with like $23,000 in student debt that I like loans that I had to repay OSAP. Which in comparison to America is not that bad. I didn't include like books or anything in tuition because or program fees. I mean, that is something that you always have to consider. I know in Canada, at least, you can easily spend like $20,000 on books if you buy them all new, which is outrageous. Or, you could spend like 5 grand on books if you buy them used, or you can spend nothing on books if you just don't buy books. I definitely did a mix of the two. Yeah, roughly like $23,000 is where I landed in student debt after my degree. Now, like I said, comparing that to America, it is not the case. When I was applying to university, I I did apply in other places, other universities in Windsor, in Ontario, sorry. And I also did look into applying to the University of Michigan. However, I was floored when I seen the prices. So I was interested to see how they kind of hold up today. So I looked into, I compared the University of Windsor's nursing program for the 2023-2024 year, the University of Michigan's nursing program for the same year. So it's 2 semesters or 2 terms. So at the University of Windsor, like just tuition and mandatory fees for an in-province applicant is $9,000 compared to the University of Michigan clocking in at $17,000. Again, like in province, not including residence fees or meal plans or anything like that, books, nothing like that, just tuition. And I don't really get it. Like, I don't understand where the $8,000 difference is being made up. I just don't know what they're offering that validates that number because I mean that's a big number and especially over 4 years, like that is going to add up. So yeah, not too sure, but that's how it is over there. And sitting here today and reflecting on my education and would I change anything? Was it worth it? I think that for me in the position that I'm in, I can say it was worth it. And you only know so much. I mean, had I not gone to university and pursued something else, maybe I would be happier and better off, but you don't know. You'll never know that. So yes, I can say that it was worth it for me. However, if I did go to University of Michigan and, racked up a $100,000 plus loan, I don't know if I could sit here and say that I thought it was worth it. Because, and I think that's what I don't understand is like you're told to go to school, to university or college, to get an education, to further your career and achieve some kind of like financial stability in life. But how can you do that when you have this gigantic loan that you've accumulated going to school and you're just spending all of your money trying to climb out of that debt? Like it just doesn't really make sense to me, which makes me sad because a lot of people are not in the position that I'm in. But for me, yes, I can say it's worth it. But I could also understand why so many other people like would not say that.
The cost, that is definitely one of the biggest differences between the US and France, because although the price per student is about the same for both governments, public universities' cost in France, they're mostly covered by our government. So a cost for undergrad is going to be 170 euros. And for graduate school, it's going to be 243 euros. And I mean per year. Private school, they're kind of similar to the US. They make their own prices, and so it can go from 5,000 a year to over 20,000. But public school, yeah, it's very cheap. We usually rent our books also. So often, most places, they are free. You just pick them up at the beginning of the year and you just drop them off at the end. And you may have to you may have to buy a couple extra books for some classes, but it's never more than 50 euros maybe for a book. So very cheap. Now I can have the comparison, I can say very cheap. And we also have financial aid that's available, whether you need help with housing or the cafeteria, registration, any of those, we have government help. So the price, that was definitely a big issue for me in my plans to come back for grad school because I had to apply to jobs on campus. I did Skype interviews from France, actually from my sister's living room. And I got hired as a TA for the cinema department, which made everything possible for me because I was not being paid really for that job, but they were paying for my tuitions. And I was more than happy with that deal. It allowed me to come back and it helped me in so many ways during those 2 years of grad school. So yes, cost is a big conversation for sure. Yes, on the difference between France and the US. What do I think of the debt crisis in the US? I believe that I lack knowledge to really understand it, to be honest. It includes so much more. It's not just the school system, but it's more of the whole capitalistic system that I'm not very familiar with, to be honest, because to me it sounds crazy that a bank would allow young adults to borrow so much money with such a high interest rate for an education that, to me, should fundamentally be accessible for all. Um, so I'm still learning about the US, how it functions, and I may have an answer for you in a few years, but right now, yeah, I'm not too sure. Growing up in more socialist country, I'm still trying to understand the dynamics of this system.
And in kind of comparing, Canada to America, the idea of the Canadian dream got brought up. And originally, I wasn't sure how to answer this question, and I kind of still am not 100% sure. Um, but I went around the last couple weeks and I asked coworkers or friends that I encountered, like, what do you think the Canadian dream is? And a lot of them kind of looked at me and they were like confused. And they were like, well, do you mean the American dream? And I think that response is like pretty telling. I think that a lot of times Canada and Canadians like live in the shadow of America. I think that a lot of like Canadian media is saturated with, you know, the happenings of America, and it's very easy to forget all the good things that we have here. Um, and that's not to say that, Canada doesn't have its issues. Like there's certainly things that we can address and fix. But in comparison to America, I mean, a lot of people that I know that are separated from America and like the realities of America think that it's like this fantasy land where hopes and dreams are made. And, thankfully, I have friends, American friends that kind of debunk that and, explain that that is pretty far from the truth. But I think my experience, the Canadian experience, is, being thankful and grateful for what I have here and knowing that I wouldn't trade that for this American dream. Uh, that's the Canadian dream. And I'm okay with that.
Other countries seem to have figured out that higher education should be free, or at least a lot cheaper, because there's an understanding that people have a right to education, and there's a societal benefit to an educated population. And the US used to feel the same way. After World War II, state governments funneled a lot of taxpayer money into their public universities to invest in the campuses and the students. I mean, it was largely to compete in the Cold War in terms of research, but it made tuition virtually free with grant money. Of course, it wasn't a perfect system. There were rampant racial disparities that prevented equal access, and clearly systemic racism still exists today. But higher ed was at least way more affordable just a few decades ago. But then Ronnie Reagan came along and shat all over that. And capitalism and neoliberalism have chipped away at state grants while also bringing up the cost of tuition, placing the burden of that rising price on students who are forced to take out loans. And now, the powers that be want college to be seen as a business transaction, just to get a credential for our resumes, rather than seeing education as a human right for the benefit of society. But if we're going to play that game, if a bachelor's degree is going to be a minimum requirement for any job that has a livable wage, then getting a college education should be free for everyone, regardless if it's a 2-year trade school or a 4-year liberal arts university. If folks want to pursue a college education, whether to develop skills for a specific job or just to grow as a human being, they shouldn't be punished for that with an insurmountable debt. And lots of people say college isn't for everyone. And I'm not sure if that's true or not. I think college could be for everyone if we all had the ability to go. But just in case, just so we don't leave anyone behind, the minimum wage, regardless of educational attainment, should be at least $25 at this point. If we're going to be forced to pay for our basic needs, a college degree should not be the difference between a decent life or not. Forgive the debt, make college free, raise the minimum wage. Thanks for listening, and class dismissed.